So just a quick introduction about me. I write fiction as JF Penn. I write thrillers and fantasy, and I also write non-fiction for authors. I've just shared my journey since I started writing, and that's turned into also a podcast, the Creative Pen Podcast, and I have a second podcast, Books and Travel. And Dave has been on my podcast, so you can all hear him there as well. But that's just to say that I do write across different genres. But this is me in 2008. And the reason I share this is I know some of you are very experienced, but some of you might just be starting out. But 2008, the global financial crisis hit. This is me in my pinstripe suit. I got laid off about 6 months after this photo. Now, this is why I think this is a good topic to share at this point in history, because let's face it, we're having a hell of a year. And wherever you sit on the political spectrum, we're probably next year is also going to be a hell of a year. So we just do not know what's going to happen. You can see and look at my eyes. I did not have a clue what was going on. And, this is how many of us feel at the beginning of our author journey. This book isn't even available anymore because I later withdrew it and, rewrote things, and as you do. But I wanted to kind of say, like, things change. And that's why we're doing this session, because the world is uncertain. Uncertainty is probably, and change is the only thing that's definitely going to happen in 2021. So the world changes, the market changes, and you change. And I was just looking back at Dave's career, and the world, the publishing market in the late 90s, I think, Dave, was one of your first books, and completely different market, completely different technology, completely different ways to reach readers, completely different way of making income, and authors, and traditional publishing has changed. So that's why we're doing this. One book or one series or one genre or even one job, because that was me with a day job before, is unlikely to make you the money you want to make for the rest of your life. And let's face it, with copyright, 50 to 70 years after you die. So we want to think about multiple streams of income, because for me, I've been full-time since 2011, a full-time creative professional. Books are one of the things I do, but this is to make sure you can continue to write what you love and live your creative life for the long term. And whether you have a day job or not, I think we could all use the extra cash. So let's get into some tips. So first one, publish multiple books. This might sound obvious, but it's surprising how many people write one book and then just kind of think that's it. And I've got obviously a couple of Daves up here, fiction and non-fiction. But writing in a series, really, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, is a great way to make income streams. It's much easier to market a series. You can write under different names. That can help you separate your brands, as again, both Dave and I do. You can write non-fiction. And if you're a fiction author, it might be worth considering fiction if you don't want, non-fiction. If you don't want to write a writing book, you could do like what Neil Gaiman has here, which is, mythology. That's a non-fiction book around some of the stuff he's obviously used in his writing. Then you could, different names we've got here, Nora Roberts, also JD Robb, is a great way to get more books out and separate your genre. And then collaboration. So James Patterson has just, his latest book is with I guess a colleague of mine, JD Barker. And this is a good way to get more books out. The other thing is to consider writing short. So, writing novellas, writing short stories, that can be a good way of making income, but also going long. So multiple box sets, multiple ebook box sets are, for me, my biggest income stream on Kobo. And Kobo is a great ebook store, very big in Canada, but as you'll see later, I sell all over the world on Kobo. And ebook box sets there and also on Apple for fiction are my biggest earners. So that is 3 ebooks put into one file and sold at a discount, and if they bought the books for all separately. Now, this is something that independent authors are still doing better, I think, than traditional publishing in ebook, because we can do massive things. So like I've got a 9-book box set that's not available in a lot of places. So we can do these things. Well, you can do these things too if you have control of your intellectual property rights. So those are some ideas around publishing multiple books. And again, this is where long-term mindset is quite useful, because obviously it does take time. So don't worry, we're not expected to write you know, 30 books next week. Okay, so the next thing is multiple formats. Now, these days, readers like to consume in the way that they prefer. So, for example, I primarily read nonfiction by audiobook. I just consume a lot of audiobooks. If your nonfiction book is not an audiobook, I might not read it. Or I'll buy a hardback, and I'll also buy a hardback if I want to keep it as well. With fiction, I only read in ebook. I read on the Kindle, and that's how I like to read fiction. My husband, on the other hand, will only read by audiobook, fantasy audiobooks over 40 hours. So basically, you have to be there for the customer and what they want to read. So here's a few ideas for if you haven't done these yet. So large print. This is my mum. My mum writes as Penny Appleton. I got her into writing a few years ago when she retired. And so she writes these kind of senior sweet romance. And we've found that our biggest earner is large print. Now, should that be a surprise? Probably not. But equally, a lot of authors don't even consider large print. And if you haven't licensed large print, it's a good option with print on demand. Workbooks, if you do non-fiction, having a workbook edition of anything you do is just money for jam. You just, again, print on demand. I sell these all the time. They just have space for people to write in. So it's, you know, even less content, but with places for people to write. And then, of course, Brandon Sanderson, already famous in many ways, but this recent Kickstarter for the Way of Kings leather-bound edition 10th anniversary, which made over $6.7 million on Kickstarter. Basically, Brandon, who I believe Dave taught at some point in his career, kept special limited edition rights and did this in conjunction with another publishing partner, and hopefully, presumably, made a lot of money. So publishing in multiple formats is something to consider. Think about what rights you've licensed, or when you're signing contracts, make sure you're not signing everything, because it's very unlikely that a publisher is going to do all of these formats. Next thing, publish everywhere. So and this has been, I mean, I've been doing this since the beginning, but this year things have changed. It really has become a digital first world. Even if you're ordering print books, you're ordering on the internet, whether that's your local bookstore, click and collect, or Amazon or bookshop.org or any of these other places. So think global, digital, and mobile. Can your books be bought anywhere in the world? Can they be bought on a mobile phone, which is primarily the way a lot of people buy now? And is it available through either digital format, so ebook, audiobook, or print on demand, which is a digital original file? And also consider, I know many authors are resistant to some forms of reading, like some people don't consider audiobooks reading, but it's still going into your brain. So basically your reading behavior is not everyone else's. So make sure your books are available to those other people. Libraries, you know, you can get into libraries with ebooks and audiobooks as well as print. It's actually much easier to get in with ebooks and audiobooks. Ask your readers to order your book at the library, and you will get paid if you use some of the apps like Findaway, for example, for Findaway Voices for audio, and you know, Drafter Digital or one of the other publishers for ebooks. And again, this is a what have you licensed? What could you produce? These are just some of, I think my books are now on sort of over 100 ebook and audiobook platforms, and, you know, many more. These are just some of them. And the point is, you won't even recognize all of these. And what's interesting is how the world is expanding more and more. So bookshop.org, for example, which is reasonably new and has really taken off. It's just launched here in the UK for print books. My books are there because they're on Ingram Spark. So what you have to think is, where will readers find their books? You don't have to get them to all these places yourself, but are there ways you could be published on those platforms if your publisher, if you have one, has done that? And this is Kobo. I always get excited. They're the only retailer that give you a map of where you've sold. So my books in English now have sold in 158 countries, and that is ebooks. So that's only from the Kobo app or a Kobo device across the world. So, and most traditionally published authors will not be published in 158 countries because they have to negotiate rights in all those territories. Whereas, let's say you've signed a US Canada or Canada Commonwealth or whatever deal, where else could you publish? because the rest of the world may want your book. So what money are you leaving on the table in that way? So let's talk about some other ideas. So selling direct, I believe this is a huge part of the future of being an author, is this direct relationship. I sell through PayHip, which means I get the money in my bank account immediately. As in, at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were all worried, I was like, I'm worried, like we all were. And I sent an email to my list, 50% off all my books, ebook and audiobook, and made, you know, a couple of grand with an email, because, and then the money was in my bank account immediately, which is what you can't do with any other retailer or publisher. The money will not be in your bank account immediately. So this direct relationship is going to become more and more important as time goes on. People want to support creators, so trust them to buy, and people are more used to buying online as well. Selling in bulk. So this is a good, Dave Hendrickson there is a short story writer and writes novels. This is a book he wrote about getting his books in bulk into schools, his fiction books into schools, and it's essentially a way you can do bigger deals and make, you know, get more books out there and make money as well. And then also licensing for translation. So I've done this. You don't need an agent to license your rights if you become au fait with legal and copyright. Okay, so those are just some ideas. Let's look at patronage and crowdfunding. So some of you might have read Sean-Ann Maguire, who also writes as Mira Grant. She has won lots of awards. She's very well known, and she's a fantastic writer. I love her horror books particularly. But she also writes short stories. She puts out one short story a month on Patreon and makes over $11,000 just straight away. And she keeps the rights, so she can then license that to a publisher as a short story in an anthology, and then she can potentially go on and do whatever she likes with it. So that is a perfect example of an author doing everything at the same time and making money through multiple ways with a short story. I don't know many writers who make 11 grand initially on a short story before they've even gone to a publisher. And my podcast is Patreon supported as well. And even though I started my podcast in 2009, I only started making money from it in 2015. So again, these things you can take advantage of technology as it emerges. It wasn't around back then, and now it's quite common. Obviously, we mentioned Kickstarter, and here's a couple of other ones. Michael J. Sullivan is now kind of renowned for doing these regularly on all his books. And Pulp House, Dean Meslie-Smith, Christine Catherine Rush, they do a magazine there. Again, you don't have to make 6.7 million as Brandon does. You can do other projects that are supported by your fans. Speaking and teaching is a good way of making money. Obviously, Dave does this, and it's not something that is what only some authors do. So I've put here James Patterson teaching writing, Dave, and then me. That's me in Bali, teaching in front of the jungle there. And you can start this. I'd only been writing about a year at that point, but people were still willing to pay me to go to Bali and teach. So, you know, as soon as you are ready to share, people will likely pay. And if as long as obviously you have something worth sharing, but you can do live events once we can do live events again. You can do online classes, you can do coaching, and that is ongoing income, but it's also giving back to the community. And I think that's really important, because it's great to share what you know with people who are, you know, maybe just one rung behind you on the ladder, you know, let alone someone like Dave here. You know, I'd be several ladders down. But, you know, you can always help someone on the journey. I think that's important. Plus, I've also put here expenses paid travel. Sometimes you will not get paid. Like, I think I got paid about $50 for Bali, but I got a week in Bali. So, you know, who cares? So, you know, and doing online classes is a really good way as well to start now. Then services. This is really interesting, especially with the independent author market now, is that a lot of people do other things. So freelance writing, ghost writing, cover design, you know, consulting, marketing help. So here, my cover designer, JD Smith, is also an author, but she makes her main living from cover design. My Alexandra Amore in the bottom there, Cult a Love Story. You know, Alexandra is a writer, but she's my virtual assistant. So, you know, the writing network now, there's a lot of people who can help you with wherever you are on the journey. Marketing help, I mean, lots of people want marketing help. So if you really enjoy doing ads, then, you know, there's people who are willing to pay for it. Then this is one particular thing I really like, which is affiliate income, which is essentially commission on things that you use and recommend, and the other people, if they use your link, will you'll get a small percentage of that at no extra cost to them. And if you do this with the intent to serve, so here's a couple of examples. So I use Vellum, which is just amazing software for formatting, really brilliant. And so I did a tutorial on that. You don't have to buy anything to watch the tutorial, but if you like it, maybe you'll use my link to buy. And then something you can use even if you write anything, as long as you've published, you can use any of these links. So Amazon Associates, Kobo affiliate, Google, Apple, all of these places you can use affiliate links, which means if you share a link to your book and someone clicks on it, you will get a percentage of the sale. And hey, a few extra cents here and there, it all adds up. I think that's good too. So that's a whole load of ideas, and we'll come to questions in a minute. But the main thing here is this is like one of those pick and mixes or a smorgasbord at one of your wonderful American buffets. If you try and eat everything, it's not going to work very well, and it won't be nice. So don't try and do all of these things at once. I've built up a lot of these individual things over since 2006 when I started writing, and you have to choose what works best for your personality, for your lifestyle choices. If you have a job, brilliant, that's one form of income, and the other one, you know, you could start building up these other things on the side just in case, or to pay for a holiday, or to, you know, whatever, put in your 401k. So there are lots of things that you could add in slowly, and also upskill. So you're not expected to know all of this straight away, and I certainly didn't. I have a degree in theology, and I used to implement accounts payable, so I'm not someone who just knew all this stuff. You know, we have to learn, but then you can just get started and it will grow over time.